I welcome you to this another session of Java programming, and here we are going to resume collection frameworks API. Java collection frameworks API, as we said, discussed, used to perform various data structures and algorithms. The last session I completed discussing with you on using comparable interface, and today we are going to discuss how to use comparator interface. So here I'll create a one class ArrayList example 5, and there we first write a static void main function. Now I save this file. In your workspace. So let's create a one more class as class player, and for player class I add three attributes: public integer ID, then is player name, and total scored runs. Now write a constructor function. Constructor accept ID, string player name, and scored runs. So let's assign these attributes to the class function arguments to class attributes: ID, player name, and scored runs. Now I define toString method, public string toString. We'll write override. So just a quick revision. ToString method is a override method of lang object class. ToString method returns the output for the class object. Whenever you write system.println and the object of a class, then initially the class will execute the attributes, the return value from toString. You must return a string value from this method. I write return string.format. So string.format method used to format string in a form, in a shape that you want to see. So here I want to see first ID, then keeping some space name, and keeping some space scored runs. This dot ID, this dot player name, and this dot scored runs. Now here we will create array list for players, and I create generic list to add 5 players. I write players dot add new player. So ID 834 Smith and scored runs are 809. Let's write this for 4 times. So here another ID name James and scored runs are 571. Again ID name and scored runs, and the last one Peter and name. Now I want to sort the records in descending order, but the rule is you are not allowed to extend any class to the player class, the concrete class. In development it might happen that your team will not allow you to inherit any other class to the class you are implementing. So in this case, without implementing comparable interface, how you are going to sort the records? The answer is using comparator interface. So here you write object of comparator like this. Comparator C1 equal to new comparator. Now don't be surprised. Interface, we know a rule that interface object cannot be initialized. Okay, but here the syntax what I'm implementing, I'm instantiating the interface, which is exactly opposite by the rule. But instead of initializing, what I will be doing is, for this new comparator, I will be implementing the definition for the method inside the interface. And in interface, there is a method called public. The interface method is public integer compare, and this compare method I write two objects. Comparator for what? Comparator for player class. So the two objects of player class, player P1 and player P2. Now inside this override method of compare method, I write if P1.id, if P2.id greater than P1.id, then return a +1. Else if P2.id less than P1.id, return a -1. Otherwise, return 0. So this is the syntax to write a compare method directly inside the C1. Okay. Now I am going to execute collections.sort method, and in this collections.sort method, uh, I will be sharing players as well as the comparator object. That means I in advance tell the collections.sort method as you find the definition of comparison in a comparator object instead of the player class. So there are two different ways you can sort the data of a class, either by using comparable interface which you need to implement to a class, and if you are not allowed to implement or inherit any class, then the option is you use comparator. Now I use a loop to access array values. Player, let's say I from 0 to I less than, player's size I increments by 1, and now I write system.out.println, and here I write players.get object I. Now let's import the classes. Import java.util.arraylist as well as import java.util.list as well as import java.util.comparator. Comparator is the name of interface. So as we are discussing this data structures algorithms through collections API, you need to revise the hierarchy of collection API, which begins with iterable and is distributed in different interfaces: list, set, queue. Map is again data structures and algorithms, but it is not a implementing or extending the collections hierarchy. Okay, one more class to import, that is java.util.collections, which is sorting array records. Okay, now I run this code. So there is a problem with this class. It says java.lang.class not found exception, ArrayList example 5. I think the name what I used to save the file and the class name, that is problem. There is a typo. Okay, I simply save as the file as ArrayList example. It should be just ArrayList example 6.java. There is already a file as example 5. I rename this to 6. Now I compile and run the code. Still there is a problem. Okay, so the data is sorted in descending order: 834, 782, 251 and 174. So this is the example of comparator interface, the practical implementation for comparator interface. So in examples, now you try to implement using any of the class, employee, product, player, order, any class, and you try to sort them in two different orders, in ascending order and in descending order. Always you shuffle between the attributes. Sometimes you sort using the string attribute, and for best practice you also try with the float values, double type of attributes in a class. Also try to run this code using comparable as well as in the comparator. So finally, here I just wanted to conclude with the sorting methodology of collection framework using Java programming.